Good evening, everyone. Project in hand tonight is going to be make a couple of more tool handles. Of course, first things first, we got to have some sharp tools to do our work. Little roughing gouge. This is only a few tools for this project. Wonders of having CBN wheels. They take forever to slow down. A little light touch of the hand will work. We got to reset for the skews. Couple more tool handles. Going to be the project of the day. Simple project. Simple is good. Wife and I went and took a class. Of all things, me to take a class, we went and took a class this afternoon on, they call it glass blowing. I would call it more like glass forming in a way. It's quite interesting. I don't know. It's something definitely, as she put it very quickly as a guy, because I asked him some questions about, if somebody wanted to pick this up as a hobby or whatever. I said, how, the questions that same questions that I would get asked as far as teaching classes is always the how much. And he's like, well, about $1,000. I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. This is how I drill tool handles. I don't know if you've ever been around to see how I do it. I have the tool rest up. We're going to drill nice and slow. This way I don't have to try and hold this spinning piece. There's a lot of torque in there. So it's just up against the tool rest. A little bit of support to keep it from spinning. And we'll just drill in probably about up to where that line is at. I do not have a drawbar on the drill chuck up there, so I will drill this full length, full depth. Just back off just a tiny little bit because it's only being pushed in there with the live center. So it would want to walk back out. So I can just spin it by hand and get it to come back out without any trouble. Less setup time as far as for me. Got to check and make sure my insert fits in that first though. So this is going to be the inserts that's made by Thompson Lathe Tools. It's nice and snug. Probably actually have to pound that one in a little bit. This wood is actually hickory. So that's okay. I'm good with pounding that in. That means it's less likely to ever come loose. Although it really didn't leave any room in there for glue. That's life. I have two of them to do, so we'll drill both of them at the same time before we move on. Wind the quill back in before I run out of room. Okay. As far as I know, there's still a glass manufacturer that's only, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, probably 20 minutes or so away from me. I think what they make plate glass. At least that's what they used to make anyhow. Be kind of interesting to actually go. I've seen videos of them making glass, but and they're again got to once again, a little educational as far as to go take this classes to, you know, there's different types of glass, and the glass for this, as they call it, glass blowing. Now, to me, when I think of glass blowing, I didn't tell that guy that, but I'm like, I would think you would be starting with a kind of a lump of glass, and then, you know, you see them people making like globes and things like that out of glass. I forget. He had a different name for it. The guy that was teaching the class makes his living doing what he does. Of course, he sounds like he works very hard at doing what he's doing, or at least a lot of hours. Um, it was kind of it was interesting. As my wife said, oh, it's fun to go try once. I don't necessarily feel that I would need to go do that on a regular kind of basis or anything like that. And it's sort of short and sweet. And as far as I was concerned, in my experience of teaching, it's really was set up just to get your feet wet on, I guess, sort of the art a little bit. But there was too many people there. I mean, the class was only 2 hours long, and it was less. It was really less than 2 hours total. Um, Shorter till rest to start, but it was an afternoon out. Made her happy, I guess. I didn't want that cone center on there yet. The other one that I would like to do, and of course she might go along and watch or something, but I would like to try the forging thing and do a knife or a throwing axe or something along those lines. Because there is an outfit that advertises it. Oh, I guess we could have switched back. Albert, you're not with me tonight. Sorry about that. I didn't get to see me drill any holes. Wasn't exciting. Um, yeah, me sidetracked. Right. So that's my excuse. So this block really has very little to do with the handles, except the master plumber that I am not. I do not have any real easy way of cutting big copper tubing, which is what I will use for the ferrule on this. So sort of my thought, if I could ever get this piece round. I think the last time that I cut any of this stuff of that size, I used the hacksaw. So now we got a smooth round blank. All this is going to do is get a tenon on one end. Also use the bigger, fatter end. Get rid of all the razor blades. That will form that. I think while we're in the rounding mode, I think we'll just up and round everything over. Get everything into a cylinder first. I think that'll make more sense. Would have made more sense if I'd switched cameras to show you what I did to drone, but I'll let you use your sense of imagination. From here, we're back into between centers. Just simple stub center on that end, cone center on this end. Cone center is going to go in the hole that I drilled. Switch back to the long tool rest. And now we're basically, all the whole rest of this is going to be kind of between center kind of work. And we got the view right. Tool rest looks a little on the low side. Still looks a little low. Pretty simple, straightforward, almost kind of a basic kind of a turning. Just remove most of the corner. One of the hardest things to try and teach people is that my body is doing the moving. I'm not moving the tool with my hands. I'm just basically rocking back and forth. The tool never leaves my side. And we're pretty much around. There's a little bit of flat there. This hickory that I have, it is tough stuff. I know that. I'll probably be sharpening it more than once. Just it around. And we'll go from there. There we go. Put that back just a little further. And then we'll have to form a little thing to try and cut this copper tubing. It'd be an exercise in showing you that a high-speed steel tool will cut softer material like copper. Because that is the intent of how to cut them. Close enough. No, she knows. Oh, I threw her for a curve the other day. I had somebody, actually Vince from Vince's Wooden Wonders called me. And I was sitting down here, Dan is talking on the phone, but I'm not really going to sit down, which I did. And I was done talking, and it was about lunch time to eat lunch. So I went upstairs, and she's like, were you doing a live stream?" "Nope. I heard you talking." She goes, "You weren't talking to yourself that loud, were you?" I'm like, "No." I said, "I was talking on the phone." She says, "Oh, I was trying to figure out who in the world you were talking to, or why you were doing so much talking," because she knows it's generally pretty quiet for me. But yeah, she knows what I'm doing tonight. So yeah, there's no questions of, you really need to talk to yourself that loudly, which I don't. So, yeah, I'll use a small chuck, I think will work just as well. There ain't no thinking on that one, buddy. She knows. She knows. We were having that little bit of that discussion with the people that we went and took a class with today. They're all much younger than we are, and he's like, "Oh yeah," like even there was another couple there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got like 25 or 30, I think 25 years being married or something like that." I looked at my left, just said, "Oh, okay." And so we're coming up on 40. So, so here's the plan. Whether this is a really solid plan, and this dumb little piece of pipe has a curl on the end of it for some reason. I think somebody gave it to me. But my intent is we're going to create a little dowel for this to slide over, hopefully slide over relatively snugly. I'll bring the live center of the cone center up, hopefully, and put a little bit of pressure on it and be able to slice through it. I'm going to say that's the plan. Whether that plan materializes very well. Like I said, I know the last time I cut this size pipe, I ended up doing it with a hacksaw, which becomes a lot of work because I can't necessarily say that I can cut very straight with a hacksaw. So we've got a fair amount of material to remove. Okay. Kind of the only issue is going to be how much fits it well. Yeah, see, well, you know what I'm talking about. I think we need to go back a little bit further. Good evening. I'll show you more of an improper way of cutting copper tubing. If you're a master plumber, you'd have a tubing cutter of that size, which I am not, so I do not have such a thing, and I certainly am not going to go buy such a thing just for this little bit of work. As I was telling you earlier, I used, I think the last time I cut this, I used a hacksaw, which of course means that I do not get any kind of relatively straight cut on it. Not sure why that one end actually looks like it's pretty straight. So there it's, okay, it really sort of snugs up at the end. I think that'll work for that. I think I'll chamfer that down. I'm sure that I'm going to have to, this is when you should be moving the tool rest. That's a little bit low for the skew. Do the low peel and cut with it very carefully, but anything else it's going to want to dig in and grab. So now the adventuresome part, that was when we bring our live center up. Are we going to get a straight cut or a crooked cut? Somewhere in between probably. And there's a line on there already. Who knows what that is there? 3/4 of an inch. That sounds like a good number, I think. So we'll pick a tool that's relatively easy to sharpen. And I think we'll bring a tool back up the shade. Gonna bring our speed down a bit. I think it'll generate a little bit less heat that way. Just a simple point tool is really all that is. Made a groove. I'm thinking maybe my little thin parting tool. Thin parting tool, which is a piece of bandsaw blade. Sawmill bandsaw blade. And that's probably going to need to open up a little bit. See there, tool. Or tailstock gets a little vibration and backs out. Certainly ought to be about through, I think. Don't touch, probably hot. That didn't cut it as quickly as I thought it would. Back to our point tool. It's a little bit less material it's removing at one time. heard a squeak. I think the problem is going to be that thing is just about through. At least it should be. And we'll just keep bouncing back and forth. We must be just about through. Yep, we are through. Okay. Very careful because this sucker will be hot. Quite, I would assume. Uh, Paper towel, maybe. I think it's quite hot enough to burn my fingers, but it's a little bit more uncomfortable. Looks like we should have cleaned up that end a little bit better than what we did. Okay. But we have one. Keep it down. Of course, now we have to get the one off. Of course, it's also heated it up, so that means it's going to be a little bit tight because of that, I think. It was also a little bit snug on the very end of it to start with. So that's why I left this chamfer in there so I could get in there to it. So chisel in, pushing it out. Now it's coming off. So that's one. Actually did a pretty nice job. It actually kind of chamfered that end a little bit. So that works. And that left a burr, of course. That's why that wants to dig into that. So I guess we'll have to get our little half round file. And we'll just take that and clean up that inside a little bit. Probably have to do that on the other one too. I didn't really feel in there to see whether it left the burr. It'd be nice if you could actually find some brass tubing without just flat out buying somebody's brass ferrules that they've made for tools. But I have never really found any, so to speak, just plain old brass tubing. I'll see if that slides up over there. Yeah, oh, we're good. So we're just kind of do a rinse and repeat. At least that's the plan. Yeah, there's still enough in there. Need a little bit of a measurement, I guess. I think we'll still make it through. Let's go 1/16 extra. Can't imagine that already went through. I sort of want a straight shoulder on this side. There's a straight edge shoulder. Just about there, I think. For the metal workers of the world would cringe seeing somebody doing this kind of thing. But really hard to tell where, when, and where. It does get quite warm quite quick. That means it's through, I think. Yep. Maybe not the whole way around, though. Of course not. That's okay. That'll work. Mission accomplished. You can clean them up from there. Easy enough. Get my paper towel. So I'm sure this one is plenty warm. Also left the burr. Not to mention you can't get a hold of slippery copper pipe, especially when it's kind of warmish to go with it. I'll sit that over here on my table saw. That'll suck the heat out of it in a hurry. I guess we're back to getting our chisel again. Like I said, it might not be the best way to do this, but it's certainly a way that it works. At least if I can get this one back off, it might work better yet. This one sort of had that sharp edge, so it sort of dug into the end grain of the wood right there a little bit. It's moving, but rather slowly like. I have one to work with, so I don't necessarily, because this one's probably quite warm. I think I'll just take that one. And since I'll sit this one off to the side. They're quiet tonight now. They don't want to talk. They just want to watch a dumb old man try to do something simple-minded. Somebody probably could tell me there's a whole lot. I know there's a whole lot easier. There we go. Whole lot easier ways of doing that if you have the right tools. But I am not buying a tubing cutter of that size just to cut a couple pieces of tubing. I'm going to use what is available to me. Be self-sufficient. That's the word I was looking for. Now we can actually get back to doing some work. Probably in all reality on something like that too. If I was going to do that on sort of a more regular kind of a basis, I probably actually could grab that in the chuck as well. And some of the like hollowing tools and things of that nature, at least a couple of them that I have, actually use a metal cutting drill or metal cutting bit in them to start with. So I could use one of them, and I probably will, because I usually make this the ferrule, which is going to go down. Will go down at this end. I will make that smaller or shorter, I guess would be a better word for it, than what I need, so that this. Let me get my file back a little bit, because there is a burr on this. And if you're really lazy like me, I'm going to do it this way tonight. But normally, if I have to do any amount of these, like this, you cut copper tubing for this kind of work, and they use it for what it's designed for. They don't worry about the burr that's left, even with the tubing cutters on the inside. This doesn't really matter. But in our world, using it for this, it does matter. But I have some solid carbide burrs for the, that'd be like a Dremel tool. I have the Fordham tool, which is basically a Dremel on steroids. Another thing to clean up the ends, if I wanted to, if you really want to be fancy, you could stick them up against a disc sander or something like that. When you put these up against a disc sander, do keep one thing in mind, is that just a light touch, very little time there, because it generates so much heat so quickly, it'll burn your fingers in a heartbeat. So we'll leave hopefully somewhere around about a 16th or a little less of that sticking out the end. Then I will use the metal cutting bits, metal cutting cutters on a hollowing tool, and then just trim that off. That, in all reality, is what I should have used to start with. It would have been probably easier, but it cuts a much wider piece. So that should still be set for the inside of our, yes, inside of our tube. So it's kind of another little bit of a rinse and repeat. Whereas it's a bit high for the parting tool. So when it just slides over, And this certainly doesn't have to be like a perfectly super snug fit. It needs to fit. It's always best if you wind the tailstock quill out a little bit before you do that, because then I can just back it up and take it off. Check we're snug. That probably, actually probably would actually could pound that one on. Wonder if that would save me the aggravation. I don't think it will, because this what I was thinking of. If I would just tap that on, but this actually fits inside of it. So when it decides to come loose, keyword is when, it would fall off anyhow. I think we'll take just a little whisker off of it. Put on the cone side first. And we'll just take a little whisker, which is a good place, maybe. And we can get our skew in there. Skew is just a little bit easier, at least for me. I use it all the time. It's just easier to do that type of a cut rather than a parting tool trying to make umpteen little cuts. So that's more than what we want. So that that's always a plus. Better to have a little extra than not enough. So our line was pretty accurate. So we'll just clean up back to the line. And so the glue has some place to go. Got a couple little V grooves in there. Get rid of this razor blade corner. Check it one more time. Still a bit snug. Oh, that's how it goes in. I'm gonna say there must still be a burr on that. Can actually go. I think we'll leave that alone. Just a tiny bit more off of it. I'd rather it's hanging up down low at the bottom. Just a teeny bit more. And that should be good. Because we know this has especially if I use that end, if I can use that end down, that end is sort of already sharp. So I do that, put a little glue in there. I think that'll be good. So let me go get the glue. I think we're just going to super glue that. A lot of times I use epoxy for that, but I don't really just have to hold it on there. And when I drive that other piece in, it's going to make it tighter yet. So I think just a simple little bit of super glue and we'll just fill the grooves up sort of. This is actually even slow setting super glue. And this is the 900, something I don't really don't even carry anymore. But then it's pen turners of the world have their own little philosophies of what glues they like to use. I can tell you the amount of pens I do is very small, but this is wonderful stuff for gluing pen tubes in and things of that nature. By virtue of it has almost a minute of time that it's going to give you before it starts to set up. This will even right now at this point drip it all over the place. Does help. We're getting a little carried away on how much we put in. So I'm just going to smear it around, clean up my mess. I'm going to go grab my little wooden mallet and a block of wood. And we're going to tap that home, or at least part way home. Anyhow, actually I don't need a wooden mallet. I'll just use another piece of this hickory and a regular steel hammer. Not that you should really pound on your lathe, but I'm not going to give it super dead blow kind of hammer type thing. So that should work. Moved it down a little bit, not a lot, but it definitely set that down in there as best as what it can. We will shoot this with some activator, just so that sets up quicker. And we'll look at the other one. This other one has a nicer end. One end's nicer than the other. Gotta be a little careful with this one. This one has some. That's the first original cut, so that wasn't very nice. And we have a piece in here, so I have somewhere to work. Basically, it'll be just a rinse and repeat of the same thing we just did. It kind of makes these handles a little bit boring. But I had more time today. I could have, should have had all this done ahead of time. Even though it's not necessarily the most exciting kind of thing to see, at least you're seeing how somebody else does maybe some less than exciting kind of a thing. We'll just clean up that end a little bit just so that it's, right now there were sort of some little bits sticking up there that were quite sharp. Probably still will be, but that should work. So we'll leave this very big tapered end for down at the end where we're going to cut it off at anyhow. Even though if I put it down at the other end, it probably would, no, it probably won't drive in there anyhow. So back to the same scenario, we'll give it a mark. Also, when I'm using a parting tool, is it probably doesn't show very well on the camera, but the handle is down and I'm lifting the handle, which is basically a bevel, sort of a bevel supported cut. It's just like using a skew doing a peeling cut is how I start it. When I want to make little light cuts, then I'm going to raise the handle up and I'm going to go straight in. And it's going to scrape rather than cut. Close. No cigar. And basically I'm doing the same thing with the skew. The back of the handle is down. A very light touch. Okay, so it fits. Just needs to go a little bit deeper. How much deeper? Another 16th will work. Do it either way. We can do it with the parting tool. This what came to hand first. Deburr the edge. That edge right there would be very, very sharp at that point. Go for a tiny bit more. Always nice if that edge down there is a little bit rounded. So that should be that. If we want to put the V grooves in with our parting tool, we can just go in and use our corner, the very corner of that parting tool. And now it gave us some glue grooves, basically. Places for the glue to sit in there and then key into this piece. So that's nice. That's less than a 16th of an inch over there. So let's put a little glue on that. Not get quite as carried away as we did on the last one. Gravity does wonders for us, so if we put it all in one place, it'll run around for us if we're patient. Not necessarily my strongest suit is to be patient with some things. Get to where we're close to being the whole way around. This time I'll hold it out over the floor. Hopefully you can't see what I'm doing. At any rate, we just ran that around. We're going to put this up on, spin it, get the glue to cover everything, set it upright. Grab our little block of wood and put it on end grain to end grain. End grain is stronger than side grain, so we give it a nice little tap. Well, in this case, yeah, we'll just go right under the copper instead. That's actually was sharp enough. It dug right into the block of wood. So we'll activate that, and we'll go back to the first one, and then we'll actually make a handle. Give it some time to, give it a little bit of time to set up. The only time you ever see me spray activator, even very remotely close like that, I just didn't need to spray it everywhere else, other than the area that I was working in. So, this hickory wasn't quite as thick as what I normally start with, but it's going to be thick enough. It's just going to mean we're going to have a little bit less material to have to remove. So my typical handle, if we were to sort of to copy another one, would be up there, not back there. So ideally we would want to know about where the high point is and maybe kind of a low point area, all of which is subject to personal preference, as you will see as we go along, but I will continue to check it with my hand. So now we're back to we're still between centers. So everything should run true for us. And leave the long tool rest in because we got a long, sort of a long area to work with. Now we'll go to skew for the most part. We're going to create a round first. And I want to get close to that copper. At this point, we're not going to try and see how close we can get to the copper. We could get a tiny bit closer than what we were doing. That looks better. There's a tiny bit left there, which we'll sand away. So our low point's going to be down here somewhere. It's kind of a rough shape. Actually, I have a little bit of flat right there yet, so we'll have to address that. That's probably considerably bigger than round than what we need. Definitely why I'm not a production turner. Oh, that's some glue sticking. I was wondering. I touched that earlier. I was trying to figure out what was sticking up. We're almost exactly down to where we want to be. Also not being very nice. I'm trying to move too fast. I actually have ripples in there. You can sort of hear it when it does that. That's me pushing too hard. Could probably also bring the speed up a little bit higher. That'll help it in some ways, may hinder it in others. So somewhere down here, you got to get rid of a point. So 1/4 of an inch maybe. It is kind of a tool handle, so if there's a point left down there, it's kind of like a, who really cares? Just start to round out a little bit. There's a place that I am not very good with the skew as far as to round down over that edge very far. This is not, still not totally round up here. Still flat. You can use both sides of the skew. You can use a long point down just as well as a short point. Do a planing cut. I can tell you right now though, this stuff has actually knocked the edge right off of that. Let's see if I can hone it, but probably not. It's a good thing I don't have a whole bunch of this. I shouldn't say that. I have a fairly good amount of this 8/4 hickory. It, I don't know if there's, well, right there's some. Those teeny tiny little white streaks in there are not sawdust in the grain. That's silica, which just knocks the edge right off of a tool very quickly. So we'll see if we can see if our honing is good enough that we can get past that. At least it's round. Just to see if it'll let us do the low peeling cut right there. Yeah, it literally knocks the edge right back off of it. Definitely white streaks. Didn't feel like there was some up here, but that is silica. Pretty much any tool that I touch to that is going to instantly dull. So let's go back up to this thing. I'm going to drop the tool rest back down and just go back to the spindle roughing gouge can be used for this project. Can be the tools you use, strictly use. Of course, we also roughed it down with this, so yeah. Might as well just go back over to the grinder and sharpen them both. It's already set for the skew, so we can do that one first. It literally rolls the edge over. I rub my finger up there, it feels like there's a burr, but I know there's not. It's actually on both sides. You probably only take once or twice across the grinder. Bring it back to nice, sharp, clean edge. Yeah. Now, in order to do the spindle roughing gouge, light touch to slow these wheels down like that. I would not recommend it with the wheels square on the corners. Might not be a good idea. So we'll go back to our 45 degrees. I made some little setup blocks on a 3D printer. So that makes this setup as far as to do any of the tools on the platform. Makes it only be a couple second job versus a couple minute job. of course, the more accurate we can be, the less tool that we go through sharpening. And you should have told me to take my stupid face shield off because it's in the road. Okay, so let's do the spindle roughing gouge first since that's where it's at. That allows me to make a nice clean cut. That is a bevel supported cut. It's over pretty much over on its side. Must have a little bit too much pressure. Just snug with the tailstock. If I put too much pressure, you'd hear it sort of chattering. This actually left ripples across there. Because as we get thinner and thinner in this area, and we're not even remotely thin to what I would consider thin, but it's thin enough that this can flex or start to flex. And when it starts to flex, it's not a good thing. It's trying to get away from you. So I can put just a little bit of pressure with my hand from behind and go slower. I could also slow the speed of the lathe down, or what I normally don't do is I don't even bother worrying with that because those little ripples will sand away very, very quickly. They are still there. I did not get underneath them. You won't be able to see them. Let's try something. Let's go in reverse. See if I can show you what they look like. Yeah, get adjustments on them. Not at all. Okay, I tried. So that's about the diameter right there. I want this needs to come down more so on that side. Just that. So I'm going to clean it up. So that should be that end complete. So this end, we know we're going to be in trouble up here. Spindle roughing gouge has more surface area, so that's what we're going to use up here. Might be an ugly, very ugly handle. That little bit of time that I went across that area right there literally knocked the edge right back on. See if we got below it yet. Most of it, tiny bit left there. It knocked some of the edge off of the tool. It didn't feel like it totally solid down. Like I say, a spindle roughing guide it's one of the good benefits of using one for spindle work is you have a lot of cutting area on them. So as far as, like up in here, I had it over on its side and using more the top third of it because these are straight wing because of what's going to hit that silica. So when it dulled that little bit, I come back and come over to a different area. I still have a cutting edge left. It's a different shape than what I normally make, but it's a tool handle. We're not going to get wrapped up in super fine details around the end. Somewhat around the end. Got some pretty big humps in there. Oh, can't leave it like that. I'm not a fan of seeing. This is not how much can we sand, it's how little we can sand. I gotta work. Feels good in my hand. I'm kind of the important one for that. Although these do go along for classroom efforts. So I'm going to make this end a little bit smaller than what it is. We will have to straighten that end out. That's pretty easily done. I think that's good enough. Good enough for a tool rest. I used to get carried away on any of tool rest, tool handles. I used to get carried away. I used to make a bunch of these, and if I had the material, I probably still would, but make them out of Spectraply, fish head. Was really thinking of sort of dyeing them, but I don't think we're going to do that. So, see if we can start with 180. Should be able to. If we need to cut some more sandpaper, so we'll start with 180, right through 400. And right out over the copper. Hopefully we didn't leave too many little lumps and bumps in there. It doesn't appear that we did. Lumps and bumps will show right like there. You can see there's a different color, that there's a little bit of a dip in there. Also not going to go around the corner onto the end grain with 180 grit. That just puts too big of scratches in. It's clean enough cut to not do that. Just put scratches in there that's very hard to get rid of. This stuff can also chip easily. That's what I was looking for. Of course, there's another way to do this too. We could actually power sand this stuff if you were so minded and wanted to. I'm not sure the 3-inch disc is the right size, but we're going to give it a whirl. Lots of ways of getting work done. Tonight, though, I don't think we're going to do it that way. I'm showing you could do it that way. Probably would be best to use 2-inch disc rather than 3. Really just as easy to sand it by hand. When we sand it by hand, we get a feel for what the piece feels like in our hands. Start with. Once we get all the lumps and bumps out of it, sanding time is cut down considerably. So now we have exactly the shape that we want, so I'm not going to spend all day sanding it. I'm not feeling to see whether that's a smooth finish and getting rid of all that's on my hand. That way we're not grinding in 220 grit into our 320 sanding, and keep our paper moving quite quickly. On to 400. At 400, we'll go around that corner as far as what we can reach into that groove. At 400, if we were really truly worried about the finish of this, we can go with the grain. We'll eliminate any of these radial scratches that most definitely are probably there. So a little bit of sanding with the grain will erase those. Hickory has very little character to it, so, but it is a tool handle, so it's not like we're going after trying to make some sort of gallery looking kind of a piece. Now the end of it, or I should say the brass part, this is a metal cutting tip in there for a metal lathe. So it will cut that quite quick, quite easily. The tool rest is just a shade close for that tool. I do have it canted over at a little bit of an angle. Trying to get into where it's wood. And we are just about there. Once again, it's kind of being, in some ways, being a little bit fussy about something like this. As well as I'm rounding it over a little bit. Definitely don't want to touch it right now. I'll guarantee you it's warm, plenty warm. So it looks like I left a little bit more on there than what I should have. Light touch. Just like when we're turning a piece of wood, we don't want to force things. I'm at the point where it's starting to get to the wood, so that's good. Actually, I made a little groove behind that, but it doesn't. We were really concerned about that. And the groove does go the whole way around. If I can take my spindle gouge, I actually go in there, pick up our cut, right there where that groove is at, and go the whole way into the center. And yes, it's going to put a tiny little, I probably stopped a little short of it, but it normally would put a little bit of a groove in the live center. That's nice and cleaned up. It's a nice rounded over edge, which is kind of where we were at, what we were after. All we have left to do with that one is finish it. 725. We might as well get those metal shavings off of there before they end up underneath something. It's quite warm. So now the question becomes, how do we remount that without messing up what we just did? So one option for sure would be we could grab that in the chuck. Could be option number one. But if we grab it in the chuck, it's also going to leave marks, I think. Let's look at it once. I'm going to need to chuck in now. And we don't need the dust collector no more. So we can grab it in our chuck. It has a flat face to sit on in there. Let's see how close to the center. Yeah, let's be lazy. That's probably close. It's going to leave some marks, I would say. A little bit of marking. I'm going to leave it loose for the second. I'm going to bring up the live center back into that hole, that point down here. Just a little bit of pressure, not much, just enough to hold it. And snug up the chuck. I'm not cranking down on that by any means. Now we can finish taking this down to nothingness. We won't want to go crazy fast. Nothing. It's not the most important in the world. I have enough support to make it not rattle. We should be able to cut this completely off. I keep my hands up on top, not in between the tool, the piece and the tool rest, in case it doesn't cooperate. Probably our safer path course of action here, down to about 1/16 of an inch, maybe something like that. Could we cut it the rest of the way off? Absolutely. Could we simply take our Japanese saw and cut it off that way? And now we're in no risk of it flying around, flopping around, smacking our fingers, or messing up the piece. Remember, safety first. So now that it's free, slow the speed down to almost nothing, see what it's going to do. There's a lot of overhang right here. So, and unfortunately, we need to cut across there to cut that center part out, center little dimple out. So it's not going to like that part. That puts the most pressure on it that we possibly can have to go across that end. I'm using my hand as a steady rest, a little pressure that way to hold it in place. And now all we got to do is finish sanding that last little bit in the end. And we have a piece ready to finish. The tool handle ready to finish and be on a merry little way. A little 320 and 400. And we're going to call that good enough because it is just a tool handle. We're not doing a gallery piece. We're not doing a piece to sell. So, on to a little bit of finish and it'll be done. So, multitude of ways of finishing something like that. Most people would just use a simple spray lacquer or something like that, which is easy enough and quick enough. But I'm going to use a little bit of the Parfix 3408 on it for me. Easier, quicker. I have some other things I need to buff tomorrow anyhow, or the next day. So we'll take our speed down to 0, and whatever the slowest speed it's going to run at, which is right about there at about 135 RPM, something like that. Get some on our towel, mainly because of the end down here. From here we can just dribble it on as we go down across the piece. What we're looking to do is saturate it. This also has a 40-second time delay. So even though it is a super glue, it's not going to go hog wild crazy and do all kinds of weird things. That being said, I don't know that I've used any of this on the hickory yet. it should do all right. This stuff is dry. That's really where you can get into trouble if the wood is not dry, because super glue sets up in the presence of moisture. Definitely need gloves on, especially since I just use a paper towel because my gloves are soaked. So if that was your fingers, which would have moisture in them, your fingers would already be stuck fast to that paper towel. So now we're going to assume it's at its saturation point because I didn't see any dry. So now we're going to dry it off. We'll get it started while it's running. You're going to pull a fair amount back off of a piece like this. This may actually take 2 paper towels to get it dry. What we're looking for is what's soaked in to the wood, not what is sitting on the surface. And I put plenty on there. Probably actually a little bit more than what I needed to, but better to have too much than not enough. If you have not enough, then you're going to be tempted to go back over a second time, which will not work with that particular one. It's a one coat application, and that's it. It will sit up there, sit on top of that like a well-waxed car, and set up almost instantly, more like the traditional stinky super glues, rather than something that has no odor to it at all. And it's a slow setup time. We will activate this. At about 18 inches away, one swipe across above it. I'm shooting across up here, let that land on top of it. Give it a couple seconds to start working. Don't feel anything wet. I have super glue on my glove though. So I don't want to touch it with that. Actually, just take my glove off, it'd be easier. And I don't necessarily want to touch it with my bare hand. Once again, I could have extra. My hands are very dry at this time of year, but so we'll let that set up. Come back tomorrow. Either buff it on the buffing wheels, or you can use some fine abrasive paste on it, and that will polish up with a nice high satin shine. Quick and easy. Of course, tomorrow we'll put we'll get that insert in it. That insert, and we'll probably put it in the wood jaw vise or wooden, and basically clean off that coating that's on there that gives it its color, and then we'll buff everything up. Just could have sanded the brass part a little better, but oh well. It is a tool handle. It's not a piece of fine artwork, so to speak. So that's one done. Where are we at time-wise? 7:30. Goodness. Unfortunately, I have both of these done. Because I'm teaching classes from Tuesday through Saturday, Wednesday through Saturday classes. I also have a class to attend myself on Tuesday, so this is kind of a limited kind of shop week for me. So we'll do this one. This one we probably won't mess much with the skew. We will a little bit, of course, but do more of it with either the roughing gouge or spindle gouge or something else. There's some silica right there. I see little white streaks in the piece of wood. There's more there, more there. Of course. Always a bit of an issue. That just knocks the tool edge right off very, very quickly. We could also use our bowl gouge for such work as this too. Doesn't really make any difference. A lot of it would be personal preference. Maybe sort of what tools you have in your arsenal of tools. It's one of the things I sort of stress to the people that I try and teach is that there's multiple ways of doing almost any given piece, any given project. It's as simple as philosophy is that there's three tools you're going to use 90% of the time. That's going to be a bowl gouge, a spindle gouge, and a parting tool. As you can see, I've now switched over to the bowl gouge. If I can get a perfectly clean cut every time, no worries. This helps as you follow the shape along. You don't need any thinner there. This particular bowl gouge is a 60-degree straight wings. It doesn't have the big swept back wings. Also trying to go too fast. We're getting lots of the same little ripples. So let's go back. Rather than creating all that sanding work, let's go back and slow the speed down a little bit of the lathe. See if I can get back there somewhere behind them. Slow my pace down. And that took care of them. Most of them. So we know from up here, down here in this end, we need a long taper. Now it's getting a little on the heavy side. That's about as lumpy and bumpy as you can get. much pressure do we have? It's there. Just there. Need to know where we're going to end at. It should be about there. Nice to leave a fair amount of meat down there. Now we can pay more attention to what we're doing. Instead of the bulk removal, now we're going to do the finesse removal part. This thing is definitely wants to wobble a bit. A little hand support goes a long ways. Have a rather big lump there. Give it a feel. I think it could use a little more taper back here, down into that area. You could do that. Oh, that's a double gouge. Now my spindle gouge, so I can roll this bead back here. Make it more of a proper bead, put it that way. That's basically almost using the spindle gouge, almost like a skew. The angle is pointed upward. I'm also cutting with the left wing, just to the right of the nose. So it is literally slicing across. Sort of a little bit hard to control that way as far as to make a nice, really long, smooth transition. But it will do it, and it will do it nice and clean and smooth. All we got to do is touch up that last little bit up there. A little bit more out for this end. Cutting directly across the end grain. Some nice little cuts, small cuts, not big giant size cuts. Round that over. That could even have a flat on the end of that one versus the other one. Personal preference don't really matter. So hurrying along and not being nice, it's giving me a nice spiral texture across there. So it just means wasn't being very nice with a piece of wood. A little heavier, a little heavy-handed. This piece is long enough, easily long enough that it flexes. Clean up that last little bit, little bump. You see in my hand. My hand's just literally resting back there and pulling towards me. That would be the handheld steady rest. And slow my pace down as far as how fast I'm trying to move the tool. Go at the speed it wants to be cut at. Definitely still have bump there. I'm not trying to hide what my tool's doing, but if I have my finger behind in front of the cut, I can't necessarily feel whether I got the hump out of there. I think we're going to be good right there. We're going to call it good, put it that way. There's certainly nothing written in stone that says we need to start with 180. In this case, there's lots of little bumps in there that's going to be a little bit more challenging to get out with 180. So why not go back to a piece of 120 and get your job done quicker, easier? You don't get no brownie points for saying, "Oh, I started at a higher grit." Well, who cares? It's the bottom line of when you get done, what does it look like? Bring the speed down. Consider this the eraser of all the little lumps and bumps that were in there. The reason I wrap it up over is it's wrapped on an angle. I'm covering a bigger area, a wider area than just the small pieces that I used on the other one. This one we were being rather lazy in some ways and aggressive in other ways. So we weren't getting the cleanliness of the cut or the shape. Just sort of be able to show you that you can do it either way. I'm not going to go down over that end with 120 at all. Just for the curve. That would leave huge scratches. Just interested in getting rid of any and all that texture that I could feel earlier. And any of the lumps and bumps. Now we can move on. So now we can go to the 180. Now we have our proper shape now. All we're doing is refining the scratches. So the first grit is always the longest standing of any. Because after that, all we're doing is trying to eliminate the previous grit scratches and the sawdust. especially in a piece of wood like this. It's open grain. We could use a paper towel. We'll show you how much it'll pull off. See it turn the paper towel brown very quickly. That's all the little dust particles that's left behind. So that was 320. One more grit and we'll be done. Lightly sand it and we'll go with the grain once. But I'm not even seeing any 320 scratches in there for some reason. With the grain. And that takes care of that. Clean it off. Flip it around. Do just like we did with the last one. Finish it. Oh, you gotta cut this. You gotta trim that end down. Got that. It's not the end of the world if you don't trim that down now. It's almost just as easy to take that once you would be complete, put it up against a disc sander. Disc sander will grind that off very quickly. It's just a little bit more, how do you want to put it, a little bit more difficult maybe to keep it nice and flat. But it's not, it's really another one of those scenarios. It's not necessarily the end of the world if it's not perfectly flat on the end. Generally, nobody will know the difference. This manufacturer should go quicker because there's less on there. And this was the end that had the big long paper on it. Pass the wood. Round that over a little bit. Don't get too carried away on rounding that over because it's not necessarily running super true right there. Same as the last one. I did dig into the wood behind it. So the small spindle guides go right in as close to the live center as you dare to get. If you touch it, it's not the end of the world. It will cut it. A little bit of 320 sandpaper. Here's where I'm also not going to put my fingers up against it. I just use the sandpaper held out there in no man's land, just in case there is a bit of sharp stuff still on there. Don't need to find that out. It's kind of a blood-free zone. At least that's my thoughts. Need the truck back. Okay. Back that up a bit. Lightly grab it with the chuck. Bring the tailstock back up. And get it on center. And then we'll snug that up. It's about 1/8 of an inch gap in between there. It's probably will leave some little marks on there, but it'd be all good. So we're in between centers again. We can mainly get rid of a lot of material up here. That area right there wants to be cleanly cut. It's actually very easily done. A little proper tool control, proper cutting method. Bevel supported cut goes right straight across it. I'll leave a line behind it to where I can cut it off. And then we'll take the last little bit off with no support. That way we know what it's gonna do at this point. When you break things free out here, it's got a little bit of a wobble to it. So once again, we're going to give it some support with our hand. We only have about a 1/16 of an inch, an eighth at most, of material to remove here. So we're using our spindle guides, going straight across the end with very light contact. So it's cut clean. So sanding wise is going to be a little bit of 320. We've already sanded the majority of this already. Just blend this last little bit in. And 400 for our last one. Making sure all the edges are nicely rounded. I say it is a tool. It's not fine art. It's going to get used, dropped on the floor, any and all the above. And see, this time we're going to use some 3460. The next thickness up in the super glue. We have a 3408, which is single coat only. And then we have the 3460, which is a multiple coat if you wanted to do so. They both can be used, well, this one can be used the same as the 3408 and do it in one coat, which is what we're going to do on here. Start on the end grain. End grain's going to take the most. Same as before, we'll just dribble little drops. Looking to get a saturation. Not a saturation out there because I'm going to get a bunch over the copper. This has the same properties as the 3408. It is a no slow setting. This one actually is slower than the 3408 even. This will give you about 45 to 50 seconds of time delay. We got more than enough. We got enough on there. Just going to spread it out to make sure. I'm looking for any place that might look dry. It is, remember, it is still super glue. A little bit of something on that. What was on that finger was super glue from the last one. So when it makes contact with itself, it has a tendency to set up a little quicker. And not to mention there's heat and everything else in your fingers. Just like before, we're going to dry it off. You can see, sort of see, a little bit of darker color there. Dry it off with the grain by hand. Doesn't really matter which way you go. It's just easier on something like this. But I want it to be dry. Dry as in there's nothing laying on the surface. I want what went into the grain to stay in the grain, and that's what our finish will be. So when you touch a piece that's been finished this way, you're still touching the wood rather than if you finished it with some sort of a film finish that would be sitting on the surface. This is in the wood itself, has went down into the pores of the wood and basically saturated them and soaked them, but the actual surface itself is still a piece of wood. That gives it a nice sort of detail. Just looking to make sure nothing looks wet. No little areas I missed. That glove shot because there's enough glue on that one. So while it's spinning, 18 inches away or so, one swipe the whole way across. More than enough activator to do the job. All you got to do is get it started. It'll do the rest all by its lonesome. I do let these sit for the 24 hours because in 24 hours from now it will be totally cured. Unlike if you're somebody that uses any of the film finishes or anything like that, they take up to 28 days to fully cure. The super glue cures in 24 hours, one day. So it did leave some little marks up there, but it's not like I'm making these to try and sell. These are something that's going to be used in my shop and the classes that I'm teaching in. So they will get these are the Doug Thompson inserts. I'm not going to push it the whole way in because I'll never get it back out. I'm going to clean off the anodizing a little bit. That I will put a little bit of glue in there, or a little bit of 5-minute epoxy or something like that. Really should have measured to make sure I drilled them deep enough. I think I drilled more than deep enough, really. I don't normally drill short on something like that. Today would be the day that I would go. Not by much. About 1/8 of an inch deeper than what it needs to be. Just needs to go down to the bottom of that. That's what the way. Simple project. Really be a sort of a beginner type project. It's all spindle work, which is where you need to start before you jump into other things. So you them both together. Like I said, I am not the production turner to be able to do something two of anything. So they're two totally different handles. This one, after I drop them on the floor. I told you they get dropped and everything else. This one's definitely thinner here in here than this one. Doesn't mean much. I'm usually up here anyhow in that part. These are mainly going to be used for scrapers. So you're going to have it up underneath your arm, and your hand's going to be up here anyhow. So all this in the middle is kind of irrelevant in a way. But that's a project done. So that's what we need to be. Anybody have any questions, comments? Now's the time because we're going to wrap it up and go get a little snack and a beverage or three. Otherwise, we'll be back next Sunday night, 6 o'clock, and we'll do something else. Until then, you all have a good week and stay safe in your shops.